Morning. First, I want to thank everyone for being here. It's October 2nd. We're coming on. We're more than 11 months since the storm. Come on up. Come next to me. I wanted you to meet the Conklins and the Spotos. They both live here in Seaford Harbor. I would encourage everyone, you can stand next to me, I'm not going to bite. I would encourage everyone to drive around this neighborhood. This is hard-working taxpayers right here in Seaford Harbor, and you are going to see house after house that has not been able to rebuild because the money just has not been flowing to the extent of the loss. The Conklins and the Spotos, after months, not 30 days, months of fighting with insurance, were able to get some money through insurance, but it's insufficient to recover for their loss. The Conklin, Steve right here, has always been working. He doesn't have the money to lay out the $250,000 that it would take to rebuild this house and to have mitigation for the future. New York Rising came, we heard about it as early as February and March. No one knew a thing as to what to do to get the federal money that finally got appropriated by Congress that the president had recommended. Finally, it got to the states in terms of New York Rising. No one put that program together near as I could tell, and I did 25 public meetings. And I have to say, Charlie right here, Spoto, attended at least 3 or 4 of my workshops. And at the beginning, New York Rising could tell us nothing. In July, they said, we'll come and inspect your homes, and the money should start being distributed in September. So Charlie and I were here just 3 weeks ago, in early September, and we said, the money hasn't started to flow yet. I saw Steve. You know, I had to take a step back after leaving house after house with tears in my eyes that people are not getting back. And my message here now, plain and simple, number one, to the insurance companies, shame on you. To my fellow legislators in Nassau County, pass my law that says insurance companies have to pay in 30 days or have a good faith reason not to. In this situation, it took 6 to 10 months just to get some money from insurance companies, and it's insufficient. My second message, and the bigger message, is to New York Rising, which just came to this house today. It took months of calls, weeks of calls, from my office, from Steve, from the Conklins, to get an inspection. Turn on the faucet and let the money flow. We need to rebuild. Commit yourself that people will get the New York Rising money before the 1-year anniversary of this disaster. Let the money flow before the 1-year anniversary. And I have the numbers. It's from New York State's website. And I'm not talking about the New York Rising through the community revitalization zones that would go to the municipalities. And you can see that the town of Hempstead here needs to put in backflow devices. These were not the homes right on the water. This is a low-lying street that needs proper backflow devices. That money needs to flow. But what I'm talking about right now, which is the residential allocation for Seaford 7.9, for Merrick and Belmore, for Belmore 5.7, for Merrick 6.4, for Wantor almost 4 million. Let the money flow. The Conklins need to be back in their home. The Spotos need to be able to mitigate their home. The insurance money was insufficient to do what they need to do. You're looking at a house where it'll clearly be at least $250,000, which is what New York Rising could give. You're not asking for anything that you were reimbursed for. You're asking to get into your home, as are you, Charlie. I'd like to call up Steve. And this is indicative of what people in Merrick, Belmore, Wantor, and Seaford have been going through, and it's wrong. It's got to stop. Steve, go ahead.
Well, I'm a victim of the Earth Movement Clause, which is there's no scouring or no washout in this house. I was given half the money I need to rebuild my house based on the $225,000 in flood insurance I paid for $3,000 a year. I can have scouring and washout because that would take place on the porch I'm standing on. The title search came from this direction, hit the house, went north, and then went south. You see the cracks in the foundation on the side of the house. Where it went from the sill down through the foundation and actually separated through the wall. The structure is unsafe. I've had 4 engineers say that to me. The house is post-firm. It was built in the 20s. It's an old house. I agree to that. But I did pay my flood insurance. I did think I had the coverage that I needed. And I don't.
We just read, he had to read this week, that New York State will make up through federal funds where the earth moved exclusion is not. But what they're talking about again is the New York Rising program. They have an office right here in Freeport, which I thank them for. They have an office right here in Seaford. They also have one in Freeport. I thank them for the office in Seaford. I thank them for the office in Freeport. And I'm sure they had to go through all the paperwork. But people are giving them paperwork. They've been meeting with people since late July, August, September. That alone was already 9 months after the disaster and 4 months after the federal appropriation was there. So we've been waiting and hearing that New York Rising has money since March, and now it's October 2nd. Please give Steve his money before the 1-year anniversary so he can rebuild. Please.
It says here in the Earth Movement Clause, which is found at FEMA.gov, under Adjuster's Manual, scroll down to Foundations, and you read that there's a claim will be denied if there is no evidence of scouring or washout. That couldn't happen here because there's a cement sidewalk where the surge came. It couldn't be hydrostatic pressure because that's the study of water when it's stagnant, when it's not moving. The tidal surge and the force hit this house with such force that everybody standing right there where you are now is 6 feet underwater right now, if you read it during the flood. It says at the end of this, if you read, it says that you will not be covered as a result of hydrostatic pressure. This house is not a slab. And it goes on to say you won't be covered unless there is a general condition of flooding in the area. Is it me? A general condition of flooding. All the way to Merrick Road was underwater.
Yeah, we've joined with the rallies with Michelle Middleman and others. Keep going.
Yeah, so that's pretty much what it says. It's kind of double fucking.
The earth move exclusion is really, in this situation, clearly asserted in bad faith. Myself and other legislators were on a call 1 week ago where we had to hear from bureaucratic attorneys that gave me the worst kind of legal mumbo-jumbo. Within a few days, we heard that the state would cover through New York Rising with federal funds anyway. So if that's really going to happen, how much longer do we have to wait? Steve went to New York Rising in March. He went again in July. They finally did the inspection today. Have the money flow before this 1-year anniversary so a neighborhood like this, like Seaford, a beautiful neighborhood of hardworking people, pay their taxes, they pay their insurance policies, they're entitled to be back in their homes. The neighborhood should not look like this 1 year after the storm. Charlie? This is Charlie Spotos. He's been working on his house right around the corner and has had many of the same problems. Thanks, Charlie.
Yeah, you're welcome. I think Dave and Steve said it very well. It's been a fight since the storm, a fight that I don't think anyone should have to fight. It's very tiring. It's very frustrating. The bureaucratic nonsense really needs to stop, and I thank Dave for trying to get it to stop. Thank you, Dave.
Charlie, why don't you go through some of your experiences? I mean, Charlie had to, go ahead, I mean, it took forever, and he's still not there.
We filed our insurance claim, and as many other people, it was honored at a ridiculously low amount. We had a supplemental, which made an insult to injury. We had to file a third supplemental, which I believe was the insurance company's attempt to just hire us out. He did succeed to a certain extent, but not completely. FEMA some information, even if it's not what we want to hear. At least it's something that we can take and digest, as opposed to I don't know. And I support what Dave is saying. We need the money. New York State has it. Now give it to the people who deserve it. Thank you.
Let me close. I'm calling for two things. Number one, the money has to flow before 1 year anniversary. It's an insult to injury that you've been announcing that there's federal funds. We know the federal government appropriated. The state has a program. In March, clearly they announced it. It wasn't ready to go for some reason until July. They're inspecting homes, start making the payments so that people can rebuild. And the Spotos and the Conklins, like so many people here in Seaford Harbor, look at the neighborhood. Come to Wantagh, come to Belmore, come to Merrick. My constituents are not back in their homes yet. And they're trying to rebuild, and they're trying to mitigate and do the right thing against future storms. But insurance with increased cost of compliance has been slow, if at all. This earth moved exclusion is clearly being asserted, in my opinion, in bad faith. So, number one, the state's there. They say they're there with the federal money. The New York Rising program has to start paying. And if they're going to hire contractors, contractors need the work. If they're going to hire the contractors, let's see the activity. I should be hearing nothing but noise down here in Seaford Harbor right now, and we're not. But look around. So many of the houses need the work. Second, for going on 7 or 8 months now, I proposed a law that would prevent this. The Conklins, the Spotos should have a private right of action, even against the federal insurance, but against their insurance companies if they don't get a payment in 30 days because of a bad faith reason. And if they're given a good faith reason and they come back, then the 30 days should go again. But they're out attorney's fees for fighting, they're out a pocket from their savings, their college savings for their daughter, just to get their work done. It shouldn't be like that. And if I could have a Nassau County law, and I wish the state would do it, I wish the federal government would do it, insurance companies expect payment in 30 days, they should pay out in 30 days. If they don't, without a good faith reason, there should be a private right of action where you can recover what you deserve, what you are entitled to under your policy, and even your legal fees, if that's what it comes to. But this has to end. I encourage everyone, drive around this neighborhood, drive around South Wantagh, drive around Merrick and Belmore, South of Merrick Road. There's too many people still out of their homes because of broken promises from insurance companies and from other bureaucrats. New York Rising says it's here to help. I believe they are. They're local. Open up the faucet. The money has to come. And questions?
Does the county have any numbers on how many people are still not back in their homes? Who is keeping track of all of this?
Supposedly, the county itself doesn't have a definitive number, but I do know that supposedly Office of Emergency Management, but also New York State supposedly has numbers. I don't believe the numbers are accurate. There's one time I hear less than 1,000. That's just not true. That's just not true. If I look at Seaford, Wantagh, Merrick, and Belmore, and I've spent months, whether it's walking door to door or in the first 5 months after the storm, there wasn't a day I was in South Merrick Road for hours at a time. It's far more than 1,000. Far more than 1,000. And then if you include Freeport, Long Beach, my guesstimate is it's got to be more than 5,000. Got to be more than 5,000. Just in Nassau County alone, and just looking at my district and the immediate adjacent. I'm hearing numbers that's 800 to 1,000. I'm telling you, that's wrong. There's a lot more.
There's 5,000 who are in the same boat as these folks.
I would say. Struggling, still rebuilding, and still waiting for New York Rising.
This block alone is a quarter of houses are empty, a quarter of the homes on this block.
Yes. I'll tell you something else, and this might be for another meeting, but I'm looking at some people right here that applied to get their taxes reduced. Mr. Conklin, either through his mortgage company or directly, will get a school tax bill either this week or next week. and it's not going to show a reduction due to Sandy, because he hasn't been told what his reduction due to Sandy would be. So they're going to ask him to pay taxes, the county, which should have reduced it because of his claim, and says they've reduced everyone from Sandy. They didn't even extend the deadline until I did a press conference in Wantor, actually with Laura Schofer and a few others. Until that press conference, that deadline wasn't extended. I'm told that everyone who was entitled to a Sandy reduction for this year's school tax got it. Mr. Conklin hasn't heard a word, but he's going to be expected to pay his school taxes for a house he can't even live in that has no value right now.
So just back onto the New York Rising thing.
Sure.
I just called over there, and I'm waiting for them to get back to me, but I'm guessing they're going to say something to the effect of, we're on it, there's thousands of people who need money, it takes time. What's wrong with that? I mean, you don't want everyone, you don't want them coming and just giving out money. So really, where are they? Can you just walk us through where exactly they're wrong and where they've been negligent?
Rental assistance ends this month. We're going on a year. There's been enough time to make sure that you're not double paying or you're not giving someone money that they're not entitled to. I mean, look at this house. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure that this house has $250,000 worth of damage. It's legitimate. Steve gave them what insurance has reimbursed. There's really, at this point, there's been more than enough time to dot all the I's and cross all the T's. And I've helped New York Rising again and again. They were guests at least 20 of my 26 meetings, and I thank them for that. They were there to help, and I believe they're trying to help. What I'm saying is you committed that the money would start flowing in September. It's October 2nd. The money isn't flowing yet. It has to get to people before a year.
And just so
It's been too long.
Just so I'm totally clear, so you've got insurance. So your first line of defense is you go to your insurance company. They tell you what they'll give you. And FEMA as well. I know they reimburse or they give a certain amount. And then this New York Rising is supposed to. How does it? Can you just walk us through that? So New York Rising, in theory,
Me too,
will
or
pay.
you want Steve
It
to walk
doesn't-
through what
New York,
Neither-
New
it
York
doesn't
Rising is a block grant from the federal government given to the state to allocate money to people who need. You need whatever you need to get you back to where you were. The insurance company, which is contracted out by the National Flood Insurance Program, which is a part of FEMA, which is a part of Homeland Security, those people are contracted out to come here and do an estimate up to the flood line, meaning that they'll estimate the damage up to that flood line. They'll estimate the damage to the cabinets in your kitchen on the bottom part, but not the top. They'll estimate the damage to your electrical system on the floor, but not the switch on the wall. What they do is they use formulas like Exactimate to just figure out room by room exactly how much the damage is. And then when they're done, it's certainly not enough money to replace the entire house, is what I have to do. Because the foundation has 7 structural cracks in it that weren't there before because I put a claim in after Hurricane Irene. And they were told, and they inspected it.
And there was no crack.
So New York Rising should make you whole.
Correct.
That's
This
what
is the
it's supposed
process.
to be.
The disaster struck. No one doubted it. If you had insurance, and most people down here had insurance through the National Flood Insurance, you didn't get FEMA money as quick as if you didn't have insurance. FEMA says they would give up to $31,900. Most people who had insurance struggled and could only get FEMA money after they put in an insurance claim just for temporary residence, which
Right.
runs out. You put in a claim with insurance, the insurance companies who expect payment within 30 days don't even respond to you for a while. Then they come and inspect and give you a list of what the maximum amount you could get for each of the damage. You have an adjuster. If you're unhappy with that, they gladly give you a letter that says you can appeal. You then have to go through an appeal process, which delays your ability to get FEMA money because you're still on appeal.
Right.
So you're stuck in a catch-22. At the end of the day, the insurance, through the national insurance or direct, pays what they're going to pay. You get stuck in the appeal process, and most of my residents didn't get the full amount of their loss. By definition, they couldn't unless they had contents. But on structural, they didn't get the full amount of their loss. If the town says that you need an increased cost of compliance, this is now the third step, then you can try to get more money from insurance to elevate your home or to mitigate your home from future damages. But then you started seeing the earth moves exclusion saying, well, you do need to fix your foundation or elevate your home, but it's because of earth moves. New York Rising came in because the federal government, the president, and it eventually got passed by Congress, said enough of this. We're going to get a certain grant money directly to residents and directly to governments. The amount here in Seaford is $7.9 million. And they said to New York State, $7.9 million for Seaford, $4 million for Wantor, $6.4 for Merrick, $5.7 for Belmore.
How much
must
for
get
Freeport?
to people.
How much for Freeport?
Freeport was about 12 million.
Okay.
But it actually, can we check on the number of Freeport? Freeport was higher. Freeport was the highest in my district, was Freeport. But that money was supposed to go from New York Rising directly to people who either didn't get enough from insurance, were denied by insurance, or didn't have insurance, so that they can make the structural repairs up to $250,000 per home. That amount would be enough so that Steve can start to build. Steve is us. Can you imagine if your home is destroyed and you need over $250,000 to fix it? I wouldn't be able to do that on my own.
Well, Dave, just so that you know, I've spoken to several people.
And wait, one other hurdle was thrown in, Jill. FEMA said before they'll give money, you have to at least apply for an SBA loan. The disgrace of that is no one was said that you don't have to accept it. I have people, Charlie and I were speaking to people that accepted the loan, and now we're being told by New York Rising, well, you took out a loan, so you need less.
Isn't that a business though? Isn't the SBA?
But the SBA was available not just to business, it was available to residents.
The
Steve,
Small Business Administration told us that we could take a loan. They were going to lend me $120,000 to make up the difference I would need to rebuild my house. I did that. I filled out all the paperwork. I put them on my deed as a second lien holder, and they told me that I didn't have contents insurance. So the money that FEMA gave me, $6,000 to replace the refrigerator, stove, and all the other contents that was destroyed, I had to give back to them and make it part of the loan because one federal agency cannot give me money from another federal agency. So what they do is you caught in the middle here with one hand in this pocket and one hand in that pocket. But in the end, I had to make $6,000 part of the loan. I immediately had to start paying back the loan at the worst time of my life. On top of that, they had called me up a week later and said that I had to go buy contents insurance to secure the loan now, after filling out enough paperwork to rebuild my house out of paper. I went and I went to get contents insurance from State Farm over on Merrick Road, who dropped me a year before, after Hurricane Irene, and he told me that contents insurance, that was about $847 for $100,000 of contents insurance before Hurricane Sandy, was now $4,200, which is over a 500% increase. So I took half of that to get the loan. A week later, they called me up and told me I'm not moving fast enough, and they're going to reduce the loan to pretty much the amount of money that they gave me from FEMA. So it's just like I'm paying off $666 a month for $14,000, and the loan went from 15 years to 2 years. And they told me I wasn't moving fast enough, and I wasn't getting enough estimates from contractors who have a problem with getting estimates because there are always enough contractors for the people out here who have damage. And quite frankly, not too many of them want to give you an estimate for nothing. And the way the estimates are supposed to be written, in a detailed, itemized way, where they want labor, they want cost, they want materials, they want nuts, bolts, screws, everything right down to the last penny. You're not going to find a contractor to do that and do it for free. It's not going to be somebody. So that throws another monkey wrench into it. And I'm glad they extended 6 months onto the other end of filing your supplemental claim, because mine is over 200 pages long. It's a thesis paper. I should get my doctorate degree, just my supplemental claim.
You know what, we're laughing, but it's sad. And when Debbie Wilson, who was in the audience
I
from
attended the
Freeport,
very first meeting that you held. You hosted the very first meeting on New York Rising.
And-
I was there.
now, you were at my last one, which was a little less than a month ago in September, when New York Rising was there again at Brookside School in Merrick.
That's
And a
correct.
number of people left, and we had over 300 people that evening at Brookside School right after Labor Day. Over 300 people. It was between Labor Day and the Jewish holiday. 300 people came down, and we left with, there was a hope there that New York Rising and the federal commitment of $250,000 per person that's otherwise unreimbursed could make up the difference and get us out of this bureaucratic catch-22. But the money hasn't been flowing yet.
Yeah, and I left your meeting, and I went right back to everybody in town, and I told everybody, because they said, first come, first served, so you better get your application in, remember?
Yep.
I went right back to everybody in the village. I said, get your application in, and they did. They're only being seen in the last week or two at the intake centers, okay? One person in particular said
Might
that,
as well come up here, Debbie.
well, they said in particular that we're not seeing people on a first come, first served basis like we were told. They said that he was told that they're going to address the needs of disabled people first, low income people second, and non-English people third, and then everybody else. That's a quote. And they gave him no timeline. Everybody I know has been asking for a timeline, and that not a single person has gotten a timeline. They said, well, we don't know.
I will tell you this. My office personally was aware of when Charlie went in, when Steve went in, and I had to fight just for Steve to get his inspection. And this should be a slam dunk. I mean, you see the damage, period. He has all his paperwork. Any other questions? Thank you.
everyone.
And I really just
Thank you
hope
for coming. This
that
coffee
before the
is
1-year
fine.
anniversary, this flows. What do you need, Joe?
Well,
Steve?
everyone